Okay, turn to page, you're going to laugh, 19. Chapter 2. We don't even really start the review in chapter 1. There's just not really anything there of note. So, chapter 2 deals with ownership and interest. You might see this word estate. What does that mean? And what is our estate in real estate?
The legal relationship between you and the property.
Yes, it's my legal relationship with the property. Do I own it? Do I lease it? If I do own it, what type of ownership do I have? Is it fee simple absolute ownership? Is it some lesser form of ownership? That's my estate in the property. So I could have a freehold estate, which means I have what? It means I own it. Freehold means ownership. Non-freehold would be leases, right? I could have a remainder interest. I could have a reversionary interest. Those would all be estates because it's my legal interest in the property. We also come across this word appurtenance. What is an appurtenance? It's something that runs with the land. It lasts forever. But what is it, though? Give me some examples of things that could be appurtenances. A rule, a restriction. Maybe if it's a private road, that could be an appurtenance for sure. An easement could be an appurtenance on a property. Some kind of a deed restriction. Water rights could be an appurtenance on a property. All of these things, these are good things and bad things that come with the property, that stay with the property. Okay, those are appurtenances. Let's see here. Let's talk about, real quickly, the different types of water rights. We have riparian rights and we have littoral rights. Okay, riparian rights deal with bodies of water that don't have a what? A tide. Okay, and littoral rights deal with bodies of water that do have a tide. What determines where the property line is? No matter whether you're talking about riparian rights or littoral rights, what determines where the property line begins and ends? Whether or not it's navigable. That's the key thing here, because if it's navigable, who does the water belong to? The public. If it's not navigable, the water belongs to the homeowners or landowners on either side of the body of water, and it goes to the center line. The property line goes to the center line. Good. Over on page 24 and 25, we get into the differentiation between real property and personal property. Let's talk about plants real quickly. Plants can be either real property or personal property. For a plant to be real property, what must it be first? Well, it's got to be planted, right? That's the first requirement. If it's going to be a real property or a fixture, it's got to be planted. It's got to be planted in the ground, not in some movable container. And it's got to be a natural occurring. So in other words, it doesn't need cultivation. So what does that eliminate? What kind of plants does that eliminate? Crops. Crops are personal property, not real property. Good. Now, over on 25, make sure you know how to identify fixtures. What is a fixture? What's not a fixture? Remember, I told you the two-part test will help you greatly. Is it permanently attached? Is it nailed, glued, or screwed? And was it permanently attached by the owner of the property or a tenant? If it was permanently attached by a tenant, it's not going to be real property. It's going to be the tenant's personal property. Okay? Everybody good with that? If we don't mention fixtures in a sales contract, what happens to the ownership of said fixtures? They convey. If we do mention them, we are excluding them from the sales contract. Good. Good. All right. Over on page 28, we talk about manufactured versus modular homes. Manufactured homes are generally considered to be real property or personal property? Personal property. Can we convert them to real property? Yeah, because we can convert any personal property to real property, but there's specific steps when it comes to manufactured homes. What are those steps? Wheels and axles have got to come out. Permanent foundation, right? And do what? Last step. Turn in the title. That's it. Okay, you got to go through those 3 steps to convert that thing to real property. Whereas modular homes are real property from the very beginning. Are manufactured homes built to comply with your local building codes? No, just HUD building codes. How about modular homes? Yes, they do comply with your local building codes. Over on page 29, we get into the different forms of ownership, different freehold interests. Remember, freehold just means ownership. What is the gold standard of ownership? Fee simple absolute, because there's no limitation at all of how long we own the property or what we can do with the property. No limitation of time or use, right? What are the limitations of time? Life estates. Any ownership that's limited by time is a life estate. Who's the life tenant?
The owner, the fee simple absolute owner during the life estate.
They're not fee simple absolute.
Just the owner.
They're owner. They're the owner
For the duration
of.
the measuring.
There you go. Did everybody hear Ariana's definition? She finally got us there. She said the owner. She initially said fee simple absolute, but that's not right because it is limited, right? The owner during the lifespan of the life or the measuring life, right? That's the life tenant. They own the property. Can they sell it?
Yes.
Sure. Can they rent it out? Do they pay taxes on it? Do they maintain it?
Yep.
It's theirs. Absolutely. Are life estates inheritable?
Yes.
Is that a blanket yes? I don't like a blanket yes to that question. Are life estates inheritable?
Not reversionary.
Doesn't have anything to do with reversionary.
The 4 option D.
Conventional life estates are not inheritable. Poor ultra V life estates are inheritable. Conventional life estates are not inheritable. Think about it. Michaela owns the property until Michaela dies. She can't leave that as an inheritance to somebody because as soon as she dies, what happens to her ownership? It goes away. It's gone. But a life estate poor ultra V, Michaela owns the property until Aranza dies. If Michaela dies, the ownership still goes on, correct? Because the measuring life is still alive. So that's an inheritable. So life estate or conventional life estate not inheritable, poor ultra V is inheritable. Let's talk about limitations of use real quickly. We can limit use in 2 ways, with a fee simple determinable deed or a fee simple subject to a condition deed. Fee simple determinable, how many uses can the property be put to? Just one. Only one. Has everybody got that? Just one use with a fee simple determinable deed. The grantee is limited to one use. Fee simple subject to a condition, they can do what? Anything but that one thing. Okay? And one question going back to the life estates. If I have a reversionary interest or a remainder interest, what kind of ownership are they going to have when they finally take over? Fee simple absolute, because the restrictions are gone, right? Good. So let's talk about concurrent ownership then. Concurrent ownership is on page 34 and 35. When we talk about the ways that multiple people can own property at the same time. Now, one of the first and most important things to understand about any form of concurrent ownership, there are 3 of them, right? Tenancy in common, joint tenancy, tenancy by the entirety. The most important thing to remember is that all of them have this undivided use, undivided possession of the property. In other words, we're not putting a line on the ground and saying this is your 10 acres and here's my 10 acres. If it's 20 acres and we own it concurrently, what section can either one of them use? The whole thing. Because they don't own 50% of, they don't own 10 acres each. They own 50% of the 20-acre plot, right? There's no division there, okay? That's what we mean when we say undivided ownership. Is everybody good with that? Now, what's the primary difference between something like Tenancy by the entirety and tenancy in common. What's the big difference? Survivorship. And what is survivorship? One owner dies, and that owner's interest transfers to the other owners automatically without going to probate. Good, good. That is survivorship. Tenancy by the entirety, does it have survivorship? Yes. Automatically, or you got to ask for it? Automatically. Okay. What other rules go with tenancy by the entirety? You must be married at the time of purchase. Yep. Okay. Takes one to buy and two to sell. What does that mean, though? It means I cannot do what? That's right. I can't sell without the permission of the other spouse. It's the only form of ownership where one owner can't sell their share without the other owner's permission. Joint tenancy or tenancy in common, they can do that. One owner can sell. If they own 50%, they can sell their 50%. The other owner never has to be told. Don't have to ask them. But you can't do that in tenancy by the entirety. Okay? So, what is if the big thing that defines tenancy by the entirety is survivorship, what's the big thing that defines tenancy in common? No survivorship. Can't have it, right? Cannot have it at all. The benefit of tenancy in common, though, is there's no rules about it. All those rules that came with tenancy by the entirety go away. You can have unequal ownership shares. They can come and go as they please. Doesn't matter. No rules. Is there another one that sits in the middle somewhere? Joint tenancy. What's key about joint tenancy?
You have the option of survivorship as long as everybody purchases at the same time.
Joint tenancy allows for survivorship as long as everyone purchases at the same time. If you have somebody sell their share and a new owner comes in, what do they come in as? And tenant in common. Good. Everybody good on all that? Okay. Remember that the other thing about tenancy by the entirety is that when you have tenancy by the entirety, it is the last word. Wills don't matter. You cannot disinherit your spouse. In other words, if I'm married and I own property with my spouse, I can't write in my will that my half of the house goes to my mistress. Well, I could write it in the will, but guess what? It's not going to happen because with tenancy by the entirety, that takes the place of any will. It overrides it. Okay? Good. Good. Yes, go ahead.
Joint tenancy, you do not have to have the other person's permission to sell.
In joint tenancy, you do not have to have the other owner's permission to sell. That's correct.
Only in tenancy by the entirety.
Only in tenancy by the entirety. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think that's all you'll need to know about concurrent ownership there. Now, when you turn over to page 38, we get into some what they call common interest ownership, which basically means they're like weird forms of ownership, hybrid forms of ownership. The first one is the condominium. So give me the basics of a condo. When I buy a condo unit, I'm really buying two things. What are those two things? Airspace of my unit. I'm buying my share of the common elements with everybody else who owns in that subdivision, that condo development, and I'm coming in as a what with all those other owners? Tenant in common. So collectively, we're going to own those common elements as tenants in common when we talk about condominiums. Now, is there a North Carolina specific law we need to be aware of with condominiums? Just give it to Carlos. Hang on just a second, Zach. Yeah, can y'all hold on for a second?